Hi everyone, my name is Jennifer Kirkpatrick and I am the Director of Sales here at American Lighting. And today we are going to talk about the magical world of color changing. So hold on tight while we go through all of our different color changing options. So we're first going to start by talking about what color changing is, what makes it a color changing SKU. And basically it is going to be where you can adjust your white. So you're going to have your tunable versions, which you see you have two different colored diodes. So your orange diode is going to be your 2700, and then your yellow diode is going to be your 6000K diode. So with this SKU specifically, with any of our controllers, whether you're using Bluetooth, which is Spectrum Plus, DMX, or a more commercial DMX controller, you would be able to adjust the intensity and the color temperature of the light. So with all of our tunable products, your color temperature range is going to be 27 to 6000K. And with DMX, you will be able to dim this down to 1%. So again, here is tunable. So we have several different tunable SKUs. So this first one that we're looking at is just our high output tunable. So you have 225 lumens per foot and 2.9 watts per foot. So you can see that there's multiple copper pads. So one's going to say 24 plus DC. One's going to say W for white, and the other one's going to say WW for warm white. So what that's telling you is that you need 3 conductors for your tunable tape. But in order to save on SKUs, you are going to use your RGB connector for this connector. And please remember that inside of your pouch of tape light, you are going to have all your heavy duty connectors. So you're going to have a factory lead that has a 6-inch lead wire, and then you're going to have 3 additional heavy duty connectors. So one way to help you remember how many wires you need is you're always going to have your black wire on your color changing. So your black wire is going to be your positive wire. That's always going to go into your positive port. And then you're going to have 3 additional wires. So you're going to have your red, blue, and green, which are all on here, which might be a little confusing because with your tunable tape, there's no mention of red, blue, or green. So when you go to line this up, you're going to want to make sure that your black wire lines up with your 24 plus DC. So your black wire lines up with your plus 24 volt DC, then your other wires are going to fall in line. Each one of these little metal teeth are going to bite through the tape light to make your solid connection. So this is your high output tunable at 255 lumens per foot, 2.9 watts per foot. We then jump up to our spec grade tunable tape. So just to do a quick little side-by-side comparison, you have your high output down below, your spec grade up above. Only difference is you are using a higher wattage diode, so the spacing is the same, but your wattage is going to go up to 7 watts per foot and 510 lumens per foot. So same thing we saw before. You're going to have multiple conductors here on your tape light. Your black wire is always going to line up with your positive wire. And then you're always going to want to have your connector in front of your writing. So just to get you up close here, your writing is here. You're always going to want to read it from left to right. So your connector is going to be on the far left, and then your tape light is going to stick in here. If you were to swap it, your wires aren't going to line up correctly. So always remember left to right, just like you read. So you have your high output, you have your specification grade tunable, which gives you the ability to change the white from 27 all the way to 6000K, dim down to 1% using a control system. One thing that I want to mention is that a lot of people ask, well, if I just want it on one color temperature, can I put it on a regular dimmer switch? And the answer is no, because your dimmer switch doesn't know what color temperature you want to dim. So anytime you have tunable, RGB, RGBW, or RGBTW, you're always going to have some sort of control. So whether, again, it's our Spectrum Bluetooth mesh system, which is all wireless, or a hardwired DMX system, you're always going to have a control component. And just as a reminder, when you have Spectrum Plus, you're going to have a little receiver, which is going to have multiple ports. So each one of these wires are going to go into the port. That's going to tell your receiver how much wattage to send to each color to make that intensity of light and color of light. When you have this secondary component that is adjusting your color, it is also adjusting the brightness of your tape light. So that's why all of your tuning, color changing, dimming happens in that receiver or decoder. That being said, you do not need a dimmable power supply in order to get your product to dim, because everything is happening in your decoder or the receiver. So when you are doing a color changing system, you will want to use our LED DR power supply, which is our non-dimming power supply, which is very low cost. Pair it with a decoder or a receiver, and then add your tape light to it. So last but not least with the tunable family is our COB tunable. So, oops, let me get it right way. So looks very different, right? You don't have those individual diodes. You have just this white line right in the middle of your PCB. So underneath this white phosphor, and we're going to get into that in a second, are little tiny diodes, even smaller than our high density tape light. They're very small and they live right underneath this jacket. So they place the diodes very close together, and then they put a phosphor coating over those diodes to eliminate any hot spots or striations. In the next 5 years, and you've heard me say this before, COB will be probably the only tape light out in the market. The only hurdle right now is your max run is only 16 feet. And then your hurdle with color changing COB is that your heavy duty connectors will not work. So inside of your 16-foot reel of tunable tape light, you will have a 6-foot lead wire and a 6-foot tail wire. So with your 16 feet, you'll be able to cut this wherever you want, whether it's 8 feet or 12 feet. You're going to cut it right on those copper pads like we've talked about before, and you will have your lead connected. So you can get 2 runs out of your tape light. If you want to make additional connections, you have to be very good with a soldering iron. So you would have to solder those leads on. But typically, most people are doing runs that are longer than 16 feet, even 8 feet. So getting 2 runs out of a single 16-foot reel shouldn't be too problematic, but we are working on additional connectors for COB. So with your COB, very high lumen output, you have 400 lumens per foot, and then it's 4.5 watts per foot. Okay, so same thing here. You would need some sort of control element, whether it's your wireless Bluetooth mesh spectrum controller or a DMX controller. All right, so those are your tunable options. We then jump into RGBW. So right here, we have our HTL RGBW. So you're going to notice that you have the orange diode, which is going to be your warm white 3000K diode. And then you're going to have your color changing diode, which is a red, blue, green diode all into one. So it is a 3-in-1 diode. So you have all 3 of them that can mix to get better color rendering. And then you have them alternating. So it'll go warm white, RGB, so on and so forth. So one thing to keep in mind is if you just have your white light on, your spacing is going to be every white light diode. So you might have spacing that's maybe an inch further than you want it to be. So we also have our specification grade RGBW, which brings these diodes a lot closer together. Now, connectors. Inside your reel of tape, you are going to get your heavy duty connectors again. So that block connector that we talked about last time is only for 2-wire. Everything that's color changing is going to be anywhere from 4 wires to 6 wires. So now that we're talking about RGBW, you're going to have a red, blue, green wire, a warm white wire, and then you're going to have your positive wire. So you are going to have 5 wires in total. So if you guys remember from before, your black wire is always your positive. Your green is going to be for your green diode, red for your red, blue for your blue, and then your white is going to be for your warm white diode. So each one of these are going to wire into your DMX decoder or wireless receiver to determine the intensity and the color of your tape light. Again, same heavy duty connector in the front. You have your metal teeth inside to bite through the tape light for each one of those conductors. And then this will lead back to your control component. And then your power supply is going to be connected to the receiver or decoder. And if you remember from before, you are going to use our LED-DR power supply in order to power your system, because you don't need a dimming power supply, because all of that's going to happen in your receiver or decoder. So if you take away anything from this training, LED-DR, control component, tape light. That's all you need to remember. So we have talked about RGBW, we've talked about tunable, and we are going to talk about the Mac Daddy of tape light, which is our RGBTW. So you're going to notice there's more diodes than we've seen previously. We have our orange diode, which is 2700, the yellow diode, which is 6000, and then you have your RGB diode. So you're able to do over 16 million colors in addition to changing your tape light from 27 to 6000K. So essentially, this is an RGB and tunable tape light all mixed into one. So since we have all of these diodes, we have more wires. So with this guy, you're going to have 6 wires. So your black wire is your positive wire. You have green for your green diode, red for your red diode, blue for your blue. Your yellow wire is for your 2700K diode, so warm white. And then your white wire is for your cool white, which is 6000K. So all of your wires here, you'll have your heavy duty connection in the front. You will have 3 additional connectors plus your factory connection, which is 6 feet long. With RGBTW, we do have a DMX controller that will mount right to the wall, where you can adjust the whites and the color. In addition, you can also dim all of those colors. One thing to keep in mind is that all of our wire is about 22 gauge when it comes to our color changing connectors. If you are going further than 30 feet from your power supply to where the tape is actually being installed, you will need to use a thicker gauge wire so that you don't run into voltage drop. So, obviously we can do voltage drop calculations to make sure that we're not seeing any sort of voltage drop, because when the voltage is drops more than 10%, visually your eye is going to be able to see that. So I have a standard rule of thumb that I use. So if I am going to do 6 conductor or 6 wire tape light, and the product is going to be installed more than 50 feet away from the power supply, I'm going to have them go to a 16 gauge wire. If it's going to be more than 100 feet, I'm going to go to a 14 gauge wire. Anything that exceeds 100 feet, I'm then going to take them to a 12 gauge wire, which people tend to not be too happy about, because if you imagine 12 gauge wire, 6 wires, hoisting that over your shoulder, it can become very heavy. So again, we can always check what gauge wire you need, but know that the standard 22 gauge wire that comes on the connectors is only going to get you about 30 feet away from your actual power supply. Right? So really that's it today, guys. Again, we have tunable, which gives you the color temperature range of 27 to 6000K. We have that in a COB version, which has the phosphor coating over it. We have RGBW, RGBTW, and actually the one thing we didn't mention is that we also have COB, which is the phosphor coating, for RGBW as well. And if you remember, the one downfall of COB is that the connectors do not work. The heavy duty connectors do not work. So if you are doing color changing COB, just know that you're going to have a 6-foot lead wire, a 6-foot tail wire. You'll be able to cut down the middle or whatever length you need to make 2 separate runs. If you want to use any tape that is left over and make an additional connection, you will have to solder that lead onto it. But we are in the process of working on more connectors for COB, so stay tuned. If you have any questions, please reach out to sales@americanlighting.com. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.